Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto ate a god-tier devil fruit and fell in love with Nico Robin? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sunken Sun. The sea was a flat, merciless mirror reflecting a sun that had long since abandoned any pretense of warmth. It was a predator, and Naruto Uzumaki was its prey. He lay on a crude raft of splintered planks and frayed rope. The ghost of his small exploration vessel, the Maverick, now scattered across the ocean floor. His tongue was a swollen, useless thing in his mouth, and his skin was a cracked canvas of salt and sun. For 3 days, the world had been nothing but the agonizing blue of the sky and the mocking blue of the water. He had left the elemental nations behind, a world that had tried to shape him into a weapon. Then a hero, then a monument. He'd fought in their war, won their peace, and found himself suffocating in the silence that followed. They wanted a Hokage, a leader, a symbol. He just wanted to be Naruto. So he had sailed away on a ship he'd built with his own hands, seeking a horizon that didn't have his face carved into a mountain. He had found a storm instead. His hand, scarred from 1,000 battles, tightened on the splintered wood. This was not the end. He had survived tailed beasts, mad gods, and the crushing weight of prophecy. He would not be undone by a bit of water and a lack of lunch. He forced his eyes open, the glare a physical blow. There, a smudge on the edge of the world, was a slash of green. Land. Hope was a jolt of lightning, and it was enough. He tore a strip from his tattered pants, wrapped his bleeding hands, and began to paddle. The island was a lush, brutal paradise, a riot of life that clawed and fought for every inch of sunlight. Naruto collapsed onto the white sand, letting the solidness of the earth seep into his bones before the primal need for water drove him to his feet. He staggered into the jungle, a world of emerald, shadows and the deafening hum of unseen things. His senses, honed by a lifetime of shinobi training, screamed at him. This place was ancient, untouched, and teeming with predators far larger than anything he had known. He moved with a practiced silence, his exhaustion a background hum against the sharp focus of survival. He found a stream of clear, cool water and drank until his stomach ached, his body shuddering with relief. Food was next, but as he scouted the terrain, he felt a pull, a faint thrumming in the air that was neither chakra nor the natural energy of the world. It was something else, a silent song that resonated deep within his soul. Curiosity, the trait that had led him into as much trouble as it had triumph, took over. He followed the sensation deeper into the island's heart, pushing through thick, waxy leaves and ducking under vines as thick as his arm. The feeling grew stronger, a warm, pulsing beat that led him to a clearing dominated by a crumbling stone structure, half swallowed by the jungle. It was a shrine of some forgotten design, covered in moss and faded carvings of what looked like celestial bodies. Inside, the air was still and heavy. A single beam of sunlight pierced the canopy above, illuminating a small, moss-covered stone pedestal. And on it, bathed in that solitary golden ray, was a fruit. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Shaped like a plump mango, its skin was a brilliant, shimmering gold that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. Swirling patterns, like the solar flares he'd seen in old astronomy texts, danced across its surface. It wasn't just reflecting the light, it seemed to be the source of it, emitting a gentle warmth that pushed back the jungle's damp chill. It was beautiful, divine, and radiated an aura of immense power that made the air around it vibrate. Naruto's stomach roared. His survival instincts warred with a primal sense of caution. This was no ordinary fruit. But his body, starved and pushed to its limit, made the choice for him. He reached out, his fingers brushing against its warm, smooth skin. The moment he touched it, the light intensified, and a surge of pure, unadulterated energy shot up his arm, making his teeth ache. He didn't hesitate. He plucked it from the pedestal, the warmth spreading through his palm, and took a bite. The taste was indescribable. It was like swallowing a star. 1 billion years of nuclear fusion and gravitational collapse exploding on his tongue. It was burning heat and blinding light, the agony of creation and the sweet bliss of existence all at once. Every cell in his body screamed, first in protest, then in exultation. His vision went white, then black. He knew no more. He awoke to the soft hues of twilight painting the jungle canopy. For a moment, he lay still, cataloging his body. The gnawing hunger was gone, replaced by a deep, thrumming well of energy. The dehydration, the exhaustion, the dozens of cuts and bruises from the shipwreck, all gone. He felt whole, more than whole. He felt remade. A warmth, gentle and constant, radiated from his core, a pilot light in the furnace of his soul. A low growl ripped through the quiet dusk. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his body moving with a fluid grace he hadn't possessed moments before. He was surrounded. 3 massive, tiger-like beasts, each the size of a carriage, stalked out of the shadows. Their fur was obsidian black, their eyes burned with a feral green light, and saber-like fangs dripped with saliva. They moved with a coordinated menace, cutting off any hope of escape. The alpha predator, larger than the others, lunged. Time seemed to slow. Naruto's mind was a whirlwind of instinct and newfound sensation. He felt the fading sunlight on his skin, felt the life force of the jungle around him, and felt the tiny, burning star inside his chest. He didn't think. He acted. He raised his hand, not to form a sign, but as a shield. The beast was a blur of black fur and claws, its roar a physical impact. As it was about to connect, a desperate, primal command erupted from Naruto's will. Live. Light, pure, unadulterated, blinding, exploded from his palm. It wasn't chakra, not tea. He familiar blue of a Rasengan or the bubbling red of Kurama's power. This was raw, solar energy. A beam of concentrated sunlight, no thicker than his arm, shot forward and struck the beast midair. There was no sound of impact, no blood, no gore. There was only a silent, incandescent flash. The creature, a half-ton of muscle and fury, simply ceased to exist. Vaporized. A faint dusting of ash drift. Head down where it had been a heartbeat before. The 2 remaining beasts skidded to a halt, their predatory arrogance instantly replaced by raw, primal fear. Naruto stared at his hand, which still glowed with a soft, golden light. A power unlike any he had ever imagined now resided within him. He could feel it, a universe of energy waiting to be commanded. He looked at the terrified beasts, and for the first time since waking up on this island, he smiled. A woman watched from the shadows of a banyan tree, her expression a mask of cool analysis. She had seen men with strange abilities before, but this was something else entirely. This was not the work of a devil fruit she recognized from any encyclopedia. This was elemental, absolute. Nico Robin, Miss All Sunday of Baroque Works, had come tea. Oh, this uncharted island on the trail of a rumor, a whisper of a poneglyph hidden in a forgotten sanctuary. Her companions, a dozen of Mr. Zeros, millions, were brutish thugs, useful only for manual labor and as a thin layer of protection. They were currently fanning out across the ruins, their crass voices a violation of the island's ancient silence. She had been drawn by the silent flash of light, an actinic pulse that had bleached the jungle of color for a split second. What she found was a young man with sun-kissed blonde hair and eyes the color of the sky, standing over a pile of fine gray. Shish, while 2 monstrous jungle predators bowed to him, their heads pressed to the ground in utter submission. He wore tattered pants and a look of profound bewilderment that was rapidly shifting into one of dawning comprehension. What in the hell was that? A rough voice demanded. One of the Baroque Works agents, a burly man with a scar bisecting his face, stomped into the clearing, his cutlass drawn. He saw Naruto in the ash, and his greedy eyes lit up. Did you kill that beast? Its pelt would fetch a fortune. Naruto turned his head, his blue eyes locking onto the man. There was no malice in his gaze, just a calm, unnerving focus. It attacked me. Everything on this island is property of Baroque Works. The agent snarled, advancing. That includes whatever treasure you found to do, whatever that was. Hand it over. Naruto didn't move. He simply watched as the man charged, blade raised. He could see the man's intent, feel the crude bloodlust. It felt slow, predictable. Without conscious thought, Naruto's body shifted. It wasn't just speed. He seemed to dissolve into a shimmer of light for a fraction of a second, reappearing behind the man as the cutlass swished through empty air. Before the agent could even register the miss, Naruto placed a hand on the steel of the blade. A focused, Intense heat flowed from his palm. The sword glowed cherry red, then white hot, melting like wax. The agent screamed, dropping the molten hilt and stumbling back, clutching his burned hand. The rest of the agents, drawn by the scream, burst into the clearing. They saw their comrade Thing on the ground and Naruto standing calmly amidst the carnage. They saw a lone boy, an easy target. Their mistake. Get him. They swarmed. Guns were drawn, swords were raised. Robin remained in the shadows, her arms crossed, observing. This was not a fight. It was a demonstration. Naruto was a phantom of golden light. A bullet fired, and he was no longer there, the lead ball passing through a shimmering afterimage. He tapped the barrel of the gun, and it slagged into a useless lump of metal. A swordsman swung, and Naruto's fingers, glowing with the heat of a forge, caught the blade inches from his face. The steel groaned and warped before he casually snapped it in two. He moved through them not with the frenzied energy of a brawler, but with the inevitable, irresistible force of a natural phenomenon. He didn't throw a single punch. He used his new power with an instinctual, terrifying precision. He created a flare of light so intense it left the agents blinded and staggering. He wove through them, his touch melting their weapons, his speed making him an impossible target. It was over in less than 10 seconds. A dozen hardened mercenaries lay on the ground, groaning, clutching burns, or blinking away spots from their vision, completely and utterly demoralized. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing, the pilot light within him burning a little brighter, a little warmer. He hadn't even broken a sweat. He felt the power thrumming under his skin, an extension of his own will. It felt right. His gaze swept the clearing and landed on the one person who hadn't moved, the one person who hadn't attacked. The woman in the shadows. She was tall, with dark, intelligent eyes that held no fear, only a deep, calculating curiosity. She met his gaze without flinching. Naruto tilted his head. There with you. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just wrought. Nico Robin stepped out from the shade of the banyan tree, her movements fluid and deliberate. We were traveling together, she said, her tone laced with a dry, detached amusement. It seems our partnership has reached its natural conclusion. Naruto studied her. There was a story in her eyes, a history of pain and survival that he recognized all too well. It was the look of someone who had been alone for a very, very long time. You're not like them, he said. It wasn't a question. A flicker of something, surprise, interest, crossed her features before being tucked away behind her composed mask. An astute observation. From the direction of the coast, a new sound drifted, the crunch of heavy boots on sand. But this was different. It was organized, disciplined. Naruto felt a prickle on his skin, a warning from a part of him that was still a shinobi. Trouble. Robin's eyes narrowed slightly. More of them. No, Naruto said, his gaze distant. Something else. He looked back at her, a decision solidifying in his mind. He had no ship, no supplies, and no idea where he was. She was in a similar, if less immediate, predicament. But more than that, he felt a connection to the quiet strength she projected, the silent loneliness that mirrored his own. He gestured with his head. Tawa rowed the small galleon anchored just offshore, the one her former colleagues had arrived on. I need to get off this island. It's a safe bet they won't be using their ship anymore. He paused, his blue eyes locking onto hers again. What about you? Robin was taken aback. In her world, propositions were threats, and offers were traps. Men who wielded the kind of power this boy possessed were monsters, tyrants, or fools. They took what they wanted. They didn't ask. Yet, here he was, offering her a choice. You seem like you're looking for something, he continued, his voice soft but clear. I'm looking for, well, I'm not sure yet. But maybe we could look together. It was the most absurd, most genuine offer she had received in 20 years of running. She had allied herself with warlords and criminals, always as a tool. Always with an exit strategy. This boy wasn't offering her a position. He was offering her a partnership. A place alongside him, not behind him. Looking into his eyes, she saw no deception. Only a straightforward sincerity and a power that felt as clean and absolute as the sun itself. For the first time in a lifetime, she considered a path that wasn't paved with betrayal and solitude. A slow, genuine smile. a sight rarer than a living historian, graced her lips. That sounds intriguing. She looked him up and down, a spark of playful curiosity in her eyes. I don't even know your name. He returned the smile, and it was like the dawn breaking over the horizon, bright, warm, and full of limitless promise. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Nico Robin, she replied. Well then, Nico Robin, Naruto said. Turning toward the coast. Where are we going? She fell into step beside him, the groans of the defeated Baroque Works agents fading behind them. The jungle gave way to the beach. The setting sun turning the ocean to liquid fire. The Grand Line is a dangerous place, she said, her voice a low murmur. It eats people like you alive. Naruto just looked at the endless horizon. The warmth in his chest swelling to match the setting sun. He felt the power of a god humming in his veins and a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom he hadn't felt since leaving his own world. Let it try, he said. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Sun-Kissed Devil. The galleon, christened the Unruly Thorn if the faded nameplate was any indication, cut through the water with a sluggishness that grated on Naruto's nerves. It was a clumsy beast of wood and canvas, a far cry from the sleek, chakra-powered vessels of his homeland. He sat cross-legged on the forecastle, the midday sun beating down on him. For the ship, it was a burden. For Naruto, it was sustenance. The warmth soaked into his skin, feeding the star in his chest, making the power within him hum with a contented, vibrant energy. He felt no hunger, no thirst, only a profound sense of completeness that was still deeply, fundamentally strange. Nico Robin stood at the railing, a book in her hands, though her eyes were not on the page. She watched him, her gaze a mixture of academic curiosity and something more guarded. In the 2 days since they had left the island, he had been a constant source of fascination. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep, and he seemed to be locked in a silent conversation with the sun itself. You're trying to understand it, she stated, her voice carrying easily on the sea breeze. Naruto opened his eyes, the blue of them so vivid against the ocean's expanse they seemed to hold a piece of the sky. Wouldn't you? He held up his hand, palm open to the heavens. A small, perfect sphere of light materialized above it, warm and impossibly bright, a miniature sun hovering in the air. One day, I'm starving to death. The next, I can do this. He clenched his fist, and the sphere vanished without a sound. Most who eat a devil fruit spend years mastering its abilities, Robin observed, finally closing her book. They struggle, they make mistakes. You seem to have a natural affinity. Maybe, Naruto mused, looking out at the horizon. Or maybe this fruit was just waiting for me. He'd felt it, in that first agonizing, ecstatic moment, not the grafting of a foreign power onto his soul, but the awakening of something that was already there, dormant. The fruit hadn't given him the sun, it had reminded him he was the sun. It feels less like learning a new technique and more like remembering how to breathe. He stood, stretching with a lazy grace that reminded her of a great cat. He walked to the ship's railing, placing his hands on the warm wood. He closed his eyes, concentrating. Robin watched, intrigued, as a faint golden aura began to emanate from him. The ship groaned. Slowly, impossibly, it began to pick up speed. The wake behind them grew larger, churning with height foam that wasn't caused by the wind in the sails. What are you doing? She asked, her composure finally cracking with a hint of undisguised awe. The wind is lazy, Naruto said, a grin spreading across his face. So I'm giving it a push. He wasn't pushing the ship with his own physical energy. He was emitting a low-frequency wave of light and heat from his body, superheating the water molecules directly behind the rudder, creating a propulsive force. It was crude, inefficient, and utterly brilliant. The ship was now moving at nearly twice its previous speed. Robin leaned over the railing, watching the bizarre, windless acceleration. In all my years on the Grand Line, I have never seen anything like that. Good, Naruto said, the aura fading as he relaxed. That means our enemies won't have seen it either. His smile faded, his eyes becoming serious as he turned to her. Tell me about them. Your old boss, Baroque Works. The world government. The Marines. I fought a war to bring peace to my home. I'd rather not stumble into another one blind. So she told him. She spoke of the 7 warlords, government-sanctioned pirates who balanced the scales of power. She explained the 4 emperors. The pirate kings who ruled the new world like gods. She described the monolithic, unyielding authority of the world government and its celestial dragon masters, and the marines who enforced their absolute justice. She spoke of it all with the detached air of a historian reciting facts, but Naruto heard the undercurrent of weariness, the lifetime spent navigating the currents between these monolithic powers. They sound like a real cheerful bunch, he said, his sarcasm sharp. A government of tyrants, soldiers who follow orders without question, and pirates who are either monsters or lapdogs. Where do the normal people fit in? Where they always do, Robin replied, her voice soft and laced with a familiar cynicism. Beneath the feet of those with power. Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the world he'd left behind, a world he had nearly broken himself trying to fix. He looked at her, at the deep, ancient sadness in her eyes, and felt a kinship that went beyond their current circumstances. He knew that look, he'd worn it himself for years. Then maybe it's time someone with power stood up for them, he said quietly. Before Robin could reply, a lookout's bell clanged frantically from the crow's nest. Ship, dead ahead, it's a marine vessel. But it's flying a strange flag. Naruto and Robin looked. It was a marine warship, but sleeker, its hull painted a stark, menacing black instead of the usual white and blue. Its sails were crimson, and at its peak flew not the familiar seagull insignia of the Marines, but a stylized emblem of a balanced scale overlaid with a burning sun. Robin's breath hitched. A flicker of genuine fear, the first Naruto had seen from her, crossed her face. That's not a normal marine ship, she whispered, her voice tight. That's a censor vessel. Censors. Quote, the celestial censors. The world government's internal affairs. They're hunters. They don't chase pirates for bounty. They hunt down ideological threats, heretics, and unclassified devil fruit users. Her eyes locked on his. They're hunting you. On the deck of the Inquisitor-class vessel, the Veritas, Vice Admiral Gorin glared at the approaching pirate ship. He was a bull of a man, with a face like a slab of granite and a jaw perpetually clenched in disdain. A common galleon, and they're not even trying to run. The arrogance. Ready the cannons. Wheel. Blast them out of the water and retrieve the anomaly from the wreckage. Beside him stood a man who could not have been more different. He was slender and dressed in the severe, high-collared white and gold robes of a celestial inquisitor. His hair was silver, his features sharp and ascetic, and his eyes, a pale, chilling gray, held an unnerving stillness. He watched the approaching ship not with contempt, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. This was Inquisitor Samael. Patience, Vice Admiral. Samael's voice was calm, melodic, and carried an authority that outweighed Gorin's rank. The energy signature we detected was unprecedented. A direct, uncontrolled detonation would be untidy. I wish to observe the subject first. A voice crackled over the ship's Den Mushi. Unidentified vessel. This is marine warship the Veritas. You are in violation of world government territory. Surrender immediately, or you will be fired upon. Naruto looked at Robin. So much for a quiet trip. He stepped to the bow of the unruly Thorn, his hands resting loosely at his sides. We're not looking for trouble. He yelled across the water, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity. Vice Admiral Gorin scoffed. They're talking back. Fire a warning shot. Across their bow, a cannon roared. The heavy iron ball screamed through the air. But it never reached the water. Naruto simply raised a hand. A wall of shimmering, translucent gold, a barrier of pure, solidified light, materialized in the air before the ship. The cannonball struck it and did not ricochet. It simply dissolved. It hit the barrier at supersonic speed and was vaporized into a puff of superheated gas and molten slag that hissed into the ocean. A stunned silence fell over the deck of the Veritas. The gunners stared, their mouths agape. Vice Admiral Gorin's face contorted in disbelief, then rage. What sorcery is this? Fire! Fire all cannons! Obliterate them! Samael remained perfectly still, a single brow arching in silent interest. Fascinating, he murmured to himself. A full volley erupted from the side of the warship. A dozen cannons roared in unison, sending a storm of iron death across the waves. Naruto didn't flinch. The golden wall expanded, curving around the front of the unruly Thorn like a transparent shield. The cannonballs struck it one after another, each one vanishing in a silent, incandescent flash. From the sensor ship, it looked as though their ammunition was simply ceasing to exist as it neared the target. Robin gripped the railing, her knuckles white. She had seen the power of a buster call, had witnessed the destructive capabilities of the world's greatest powers. But this was different. This wasn't destruction. It was negation. Absolute, effortless defense. This is impossible, Goran roared, his face turning a deep purple. He's making a mockery of us. Full speed ahead. Ram them. We'll crush their pathetic little ship to splinters. The black warship surged forward, its armored prow cutting through the water like a shark's fin. Naruto sighed. I really didn't want to do this. He looked at Robin. Hold on to something. He turned to face the oncoming vessel. He wasn't angry. He was focused, a lens gathering the power that coursed through him. He extended his right hand, his index and middle fingers pointing forward like a blade. He took a deep breath, and the air around his fingertips began to shimmer, distorting with heat. He wasn't gathering energy from the sun now, he was focusing the star within him. Sun Lance, he whispered. It wasn't a beam of light. It was a needle-thin, perfectly straight line of pure, concentrated thermal energy that shot forward. It didn't touch the ship. It struck the water 20 yards in front of its prow. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the ocean itself exploded. An enormous plume of steam erupted from the sea with the force of a volcanic eruption. The water in the path of the Veritas flash boiled, the sheer kinetic energy of the phase shift creating a shockwave that lifted the warship's bow clear out of the water. The massive vessel was tossed backward like a child's toy, its momentum utterly broken. The steam, superheated to thousands of degrees, washed over its hull, flash igniting the crimson sails, which vanished in a whoosh of black ash. The wood of the deck smoked and blackened, and the air filled with the shriek of tortured metal and the screams of scalded sailors. The ship slammed back down into the water, crippled, dismasted, and dead in the water. A thick cloud of steam hissed around its wounded form. Naruto lowered his hand, the incandescent glow fading from his fingertips. He hadn't aimed for a single person. He had targeted the ocean. The result was total, non-lethal incapacitation. On the deck of the ruined Veritas, amid the chaos of his panicked crew, Inquisitor Samael stood untouched. A faint shimmer of energy had protected him from the worst of the steam blast. He gazed across the water at Naruto, his cold gray eyes filled not with rage or fear, but with a terrifying, ecstatic clarity. He slowly raised a small, black Den Mushi to his lips. Inquisitor Samael to Central Command, he said, his voice level. Subject confirmed. Power signature is divine in nature. A paramesha of the highest order, the Hito no Mi, model, Amaterasu, the sun god fruit. It is a heresy made manifest. He paused, his gaze fixed on Naruto, who was now turning his ship away. Designation: Icarus. He is not to be engaged by standard forces. He is a target for the Godslayer protocol. I will continue observation. Samael out. He snapped the communication shut, a thin, chilling smile gracing his lips. The hunt had begun. As the unruly Thorn sailed away, leaving the crippled warship wallowing in its own steam, Robin turned to Naruto. She stared at him, her mind, which had catalogued countless devil fruits and historical atrocities, struggling to process what she had just witnessed. He hadn't just defeated a marine warship. He had commanded the elements with the casual authority of a deity. The setting sun cast his silhouette in gold, his blonde hair like a halo. The sheer, overwhelming scale of his power was terrifying. But it was the way he used it, with precision, with restraint, without malice, that truly shook her. What are you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Naruto looked down at his own hands, which still felt a little too warm, a little too bright. He met her gaze, his blue eyes holding a universe of newfound wonder and a heavy dose of uncertainty. I don't know, he admitted, his voice quiet but firm with a new, unshakable resolve. But I'm going to find out. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Whispers of Alabasta. The silence between them was a living thing. A space filled with the unspoken questions of the last 2 days. Naruto sat perched on the ship's main mast, 100 feet above the deck, watching the world slide by. Down below, Robin navigated, her touch on the helm steady and sure. After the encounter with the celestial censors, the easy rhythm they had found was replaced by a tense, watchful quiet. He was a target, designated, Icarus, by a man with eyes like chips of ice. A heresy made manifest. The words echoed in his mind, not with fear, but with a strange sense of defiance. He'd been called a demon and a monster his whole life. A heretic felt like a step up. From his vantage point, he could see the curvature of the earth, the endless blue meeting the brilliant, life-giving sun that was now the source of his impossible power. He could feel its rays on his skin, a constant, loving caress that replenished the star in his chest. He reached out, letting a wisp of golden energy dance on his fingertips. It was becoming easier, more instinctual. The Hito Hito no Mi model, Amaterasu, as the man Samael had called it. The sun god fruit. He had eaten divinity, and now he had to figure out what that meant in a world that apparently hunted gods. He dropped from the mast, not climbing down but simply stepping off, his body dissolving into a controlled fall of shimmering light particles before reforming on the deck beside Robin. Silent as a thought, she didn't startle, merely glanced at him, a small, wry smile on her lips. Show off. Just stretching my legs, he grinned, the tension breaking. So, navigator, any idea where we're actually going? Or are we just trying to put as much water as possible between us and Mr. Creepy Eyes? Robin's smile faded, her expression turning serious. Running is a temporary solution. Men like Samael don't give up, they merely recalculate. What we need is to disappear. We need supplies, information, and a place so embroiled in its own problems that two strangers won't be the most interesting thing happening. She unfurled a chart on the nearby crate, weighing it down with a sextant. Her finger traced a path across the sea to a large, crescent-shaped island. Alabasta, a desert kingdom. It's vast, ancient, and currently on the brink of civil war. It's the perfect place to get lost. Naruto leaned over the map, his eyes tracing the coastline. Civil war. What's the problem? The problem is rain, she said, her voice low. Or the lack of it. The country has been in the grip of a drought for 3 years. People are starving. The strange thing is, the capital city, Alubarna, and a few others seem to be spared. Rain falls there, while the rest of the country turns to dust. She tapped a port city named Nanohana. The people blame their king, Nefertari Cobra. They believe he is using a forbidden substance called dance powder to steal the country's rain for the capital. A rebel army has formed, led by a man named Koza. They are marching toward the capital to depose the king. The situation is a powder keg waiting for a spark. Naruto listened, a familiar, weary weight settling in his gut. A suffering populace, a leader blamed for a disaster. A rebellion born of desperation. He had seen this story play out a dozen times in the elemental nations. It never ended without bloodshed. And you think this king is really stealing the rain? He asked. Robin's gaze was unreadable. She looked out at the sea, her dark hair whipping in the wind. What I think, she said carefully, is that nothing in the Grand Line is ever that simple. And that Alabasta is the current headquarters of my former employer, Baroque Works. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The same guys from the island. The very same. Led by the warlord of the sea, Sir Crocodile. Also known as Mr. Zero. The name fell from her lips like a shard of glass. He is a man of immense power and bottomless ambition. It seems a remarkable coincidence that a warlord known for his secrecy would set up shop in a kingdom tearing itself apart over a drought, doesn't it? The implication was clear and ugly. Crocodile was pulling the strings. He was the one stoking the flames of war, likely for his own gain. And Robin, as his second in command, knew it. She had been a part of it. He could see the shadow of that knowledge in her eyes, a self-loathing she tried to hide behind a wall of cool detachment. He didn't press her. He didn't judge. He just nodded. All right, Alabasta it is. Let's go get lost. The port of Nanohana was a city of sighs and whispers. The air was thick with dust and despair. The sun, Naruto's constant companion, was a brutal tyrant here, beating down on the cracked earth and bleached buildings. The people moved with a lethargic slowness, their faces etched with worry and resentment. He could feel their misery like a physical weight, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy he felt within himself. They docked the unruly Thorn in a secluded cove down the coast and walked into the city. dressed in cloaks to hide their faces and ward off the oppressive heat. The city square was crowded, but not with the cheerful bustle of commerce. People were gathered around a public well, where armed royal guardsmen were rationing out meager buckets of water. Arguments broke out, children cried from thirst, and the guardsmen's faces were stony masks of grim duty. 1 bucket per family. That's the law, a guard captain shouted, shoving a desperate man back. My fields are dust. My children are sick. How can we live on this? The man pleaded. Naruto's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He started to move, a low growl in his throat, but Robin placed a calming hand on his arm. Not yet, she murmured. We know nothing. Acting now will only get us noticed. He hated it, but he knew she was right. He was not the hero of the Leaf Village here. He was a fugitive, a heretic. He forced himself to stand down, the anger in him simmering like the heat off the pavement. They found a small, dusty tavern and took a corner table. The air inside was thick with the smell of cheap ale and hopelessness. 2 men at the bar were speaking in low, furtive tones. Heard Koza's army took the oasis at Yuba. One said, the royal army is spread thin. It's only a matter of time. It's the king's own fault, the other grumbled, staring into his drink. Sitting in his pala, CE with his stolen rain while we bake to death. Did you see the shipment of dance powder they found last week? The proof is right there. Robin caught Naruto's eye, a silent communication passing between them. Dance powder. The supposed proof. As they listened, 2 figures entered the tavern, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. They were an odd pair. One was a man with a ridiculous pompadour and the number 9 tattooed on his cheek, carrying a pair of steel bats. The other was a large, muscular woman with a crown, who moved with an unnerving, almost regal confidence. They radiated an arrogance that was completely at odds with the city's downtrodden mood. They scanned the room, and the man's eyes landed on their table. Specifically, on Robin. A slow, greasy smile spread across his face. Well, he said, sauntering over, his steel bats clicking together. Look what we have here, Miss Monday. I thought you'd deserted us, Miss All Sunday. Mr. Zero is very interested in your whereabouts. Robin's face was a perfect, unreadable mask, but Naruto felt the slight tensing of the muscles in her arm. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice cool and level. Oh, I think you do, the man. Mr. 9, sneered. You disappear from your post, and a few days later, a dozen of our Million's agents are found beaten and burned on some backwater island. You've got a lot of explaining to do. He leered at Naruto. And who's this? Your new bodyguard. He doesn't look like much. Miss Monday cracked her knuckles, the sound like rocks grinding together. Orders are to bring you in, Miss All Sunday. Alive is preferred, but not required. The tavern went silent. Patrons began to quietly slip out the back. The owner ducked behind the bar. Naruto didn't even look at them. He kept his eyes on Robin. A silent question in his gaze. My lead or yours? She gave the faintest of nods, her eyes flicking toward Mr. 9. His mouth. Shut it. It was all he needed. Mr. 9 took another step forward, raising his bats. Now, are you going to come quietly, or do we have to get ugly? Ugly it is, then, Naruto said, his voice deceptively mild. He didn't move from his seat. He simply lifted his left hand, pointing his index finger at Mr. 9. A tiny bead of intensely bright light, no bigger than a grain of rice, formed at his fingertip. He flicked it. The bead of light shot across the room. It didn't move with the speed of a bullet, it was faster. It was instantaneous. It struck the steel bat Mr. 9 was raising, and instead of a clang, there was a soft hiss. A perfectly round, pencil-thin hole appeared through the solid metal, its edges glowing a bright, molten orange. Mr. 9 froze, his eyes wide as he stared at the impossible hole in his weapon. He hadn't even seen it happen. In that moment of stunned silence, Robin acted. Diaz Fleur, she murmured, crossing her arms. 10 arms sprouted from Mr. 9's back and shoulders, their movements a blur. They seized his limbs, his neck, and clamped a hand firmly over his mouth before he could even scream. In less than a second, he was completely immobilized, his eyes bulging with terror. Miss Monday roared and charged, her fists like wrecking balls. She was fast for her size, but to Naruto, she was moving through molasses. He sighed, pushed his chair back, and stood up. He met her charge not with a fist, but with an open palm. As her powerful punch was about to connect, his hand began to glow, emitting a soft, golden light and an almost imperceptible wave of heat. It wasn't an attack, it was a cushion. Her fist hit the light and stopped dead. Its kinetic energy instantly and silently absorbed and dissipated as heat. It was like punching a wall of warm, unbreakable gelatin. She stared in disbelief at her fist, buried an inch deep in a shimmering, solid aura that surrounded his hand. My turn, Naruto said pleasantly. He closed his hand, gently gripping her fist. The golden light intensified. The leather of her glove began to smoke, then char. She cried out in pain and surprise, trying to pull back, but his grip was unyielding. He wasn't crushing her hand. He was simply holding it, letting the controlled, solar heat do the work. Let her go, he said, his voice calm but carrying an absolute authority that cut through the room. And you and I are going to have a little chat. His eyes flicked to Robin, who still had Mr. 9 completely bound. And my friend is going to have a word with him. Miss Monday, sweat beading on her forehead, her strongest punch neutralized without effort and her hand feeling like it was being held in a forge, made a quick and wise decision. She nodded frantically. Naruto released her, and she stumbled back, clutching her scorched and blistering hand. They dragged the 2 Baroque Works agents into the alley behind the tavern. Robin's technique was terrifyingly effective for interrogation. With arms sprouting from his body to bend his joints at unnatural angles, Mr. 9 spilled everything he knew in a torrent of pained whispers. He confirmed their suspicions. Crocodile was indeed orchestrating the entire war. He had established a base in the casino city of Rainbase. The dance powder had been planted by Baroque Works agents to frame the king. The ultimate goal was something called Utopia, a plan to seize control of the entire country. And it was all about to reach its climax. The rebel army was only days away from launching their final assault on the capital. After extracting every last piece of information, Robin looked at Naruto. Her expression was grim. Clutch. There was a sickening series of cracks from Mr. 9's immobilized form, and he went limp, unconscious but alive. Naruto, meanwhile, had been having a quieter conversation with Miss Monday. He hadn't threatened her. He had simply stood before her, the faint golden aura around him making the dusty alley feel warm and bright. He asked her questions, and she answered them, her earlier bravado completely gone, replaced by an awestruck fear. When they were done, he looked at the terrified woman. Leave. Tell no one you saw us. If you do, I won't have to find you. You'll just know I'm coming. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise, delivered with the calm certainty of a sunrise. She scrambled to her feet and fled, not even looking back at her fallen partner. Naruto looked down at the unconscious Mr. 9. What about him? He's a loose end, Robin said, her voice hard. It was the voice of Miss All Sunday, the survivor, the pragmatist. Naruto shook his head. He placed a hand on the man's forehead. A gentle, warm light emanated from his palm. No more killing. The light brightened for a moment, and when he pulled his hand away, Mr. 9's breathing was deep and even. He'll sleep for a day. By the time he wakes up, we'll be long gone. He was erasing the man's short-term memory of the encounter. It was a subtle application of his power, manipulating the neural energy of the brain with a focused burst of light and heat. It was delicate, precise, and something he hadn't even known he could do until the moment he tried. They left the alley and walked through the darkening streets of Nanohana. The whispers of rebellion were growing louder, the despair of the people a palpable thing in the air. Robin was silent, her thoughts clearly churning. She had been an accomplice to this grand, cruel scheme. She had helped Crocodile bring a nation to its knees. This, Utopia, Naruto said, breaking the silence. He's not just after the throne, is he? There's something else. Robin stopped, looking at him, her dark eyes reflecting the first stars appearing in the twilight sky. Alabasta is one of the oldest kingdoms in the world. Its royal family has guarded a secret for 800 years. She took a breath. There is a poneglyph hidden somewhere in the capital. One that contains information about one of the ancient weapons, Pluton. The name meant nothing to Naruto, but the weight W.ith which she said it told him everything. This was the prize. The reason she had joined Crocodile in the first place. The knowledge she craved, the true history of the world. And Crocodile wants this weapon, Naruto stated. He wants the power to overthrow the world, she confirmed. They stood there for a long moment, the fate of a nation hanging in the air between them. Naruto looked at the faces of the people passing by, at the thirsty children and the worried parents, and he saw the faces of the people he had sworn to protect in another life. He looked at Robin, at the woman who had spent her life running and hiding, chasing a truth that the world wanted to keep buried. He had come to the Grand Line seeking freedom, a place where he could just be himself. But he was starting to realize that for him, being himself meant not being able to turn his back on people who were suffering. "Forget getting lost," he said, his voice ringing with a conviction that made the very air seem to hum. "Forget supplies. We're not leaving Alabasta." Robin looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a dawning, fragile hope. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes burning with an our light that was far brighter than the dying sun. "We're going to stop this war. We're going to take down a warlord. And then, we're going to make it rain." A slow smile, genuine and beautiful, spread across Robin's face. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone in the storm. "That," she said, her voice filled with a newfound warmth, "is the most ridiculous plan I have ever heard. When do we start?" Somewhere, in a fortified world government intelligence outpost, Inquisitor Samael looked at a map of the Grand Line. An aide approached, holding a transponder snail report. "Sir, we have a confirmed sighting. The Acid, Icarus, and the fugitive Nico Robin have made landfall in the Alabasta Kingdom." Samael didn't look up from the map. A thin, predatory smile touched his lips. "Of course he has. Like a moth to a flame. The warlord Crocodile is a blunt instrument, but a useful one. Let him be the hammer." He placed a white game piece on the map, directly over Alabasta. "Let's see if our sun god cracks under pressure." Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Desert and the Crocodile. The Alabastan Desert was a sea of fire and silence. The sun, a white-hot coin in a bleached sky, hammered down relentlessly, turning the endless dunes into waves of shimmering, superheated air. To any normal person, it was a vision of hell. To Naruto, it was a warm bath. He walked with an easy, tireless stride, the sand barely seeming to crunch under his boots. The oppressive heat that would have felled a lesser man in hours was a gentle, invigorating hum against his skin. A constant transfusion of energy from his celestial parent. He felt fantastic. Robin, by contrast, was the picture of elegant suffering. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a light cloak, but beads of sweat still traced paths through the dust on her temples. Her steps were measured and deliberate, the movements of someone conserving every drop of energy, but the desert was a patient, relentless thief. Naruto paused, waiting for her to catch up. He watched the slight tremor in her hand as she raised a canteen to her lips for a small, rationed sip. He frowned. "This is stupid," he said, the words coming out in a puff of warm air. Walking across a desert to challenge a warlord with an army of assassins at his back. Robin replied, her voice a dry rasp. "I'm beginning to agree. No, this." He gestured to her, then to the unforgiving landscape. "You're burning up." "I'm not." He stepped closer and held his hand out, palm up, a few inches from her arm. He didn't touch her, but he focused, pulling the ambient heat away from her, drawing it into himself. The air around her immediately cooled by 20 degrees. A small, personal pocket of shade in the middle of a furnace. Robin's eyes widened slightly as the oppressive heat clinging to her clothes and skin vanished, replaced by a pleasant, refreshing coolness. A visible sigh of relief escaped her lips. "How?" "The fruit," he said with a shrug, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It's all just energy. Heat is energy. I can move it around." He fell into step beside her, maintaining the comfortable bubble of coolness around her as they walked. "It's more efficient this way. I get a snack, you don't get cooked. Everybody wins." She looked at him, at the effortless way he wielded a power that could level a warship. Now using it to provide her with a sliver of comfort. In her world, power was a weapon, a shield, a tool for coercion. It was never gentle. It was never kind. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest. One that had nothing to do with the sun. "Thank you, Naruto," she said, the words simple but carrying a weight of sincerity that surprised even her. Don't mention it, he said, a cheerful grin lighting up his face. So, about this plan of ours. Let's go take down a warlord. Sounds great, but I'm thinking we might need a few more details. Details are my specialty, Robin confirmed, her mind now clear of the heat-induced haze, sharpening to its usual razor's edge. Crocodile is a Logia type. He ate the Suna no Mi, the sand fruit. He can turn his body into sand at will, making him immune to most physical attacks. He can create sandstorms, blades of sand, and drain the moisture from anything he touches, living or not. Naruto's grin didn't falter. So I can't punch him. Got it. What else? He is meticulous, paranoid. His organization, Baroque Works, is a pyramid of spies and assassins. His headquarters is in Rainbase, a city he built in the middle of the desert. It's a gambling oasis, a monument to his own success, and a fortress. His base of operations is hidden beneath the city's largest casino, Rain Dinners. A secret evil lair under a casino. Classy, Naruto quipped. So we walk in, find the secret elevator, and punch him really hard. Wait, no, can't punch him. Okay, we find the secret elevator and I turn him into glass. He looked at his hand. A flicker of heat shimmering around it. It was a genuine question. He didn't know the limits of his own power yet. A frontal assault is suicide, Robin said, a chill in her voice. Even for you. He'll have his officer agents with him. Mr. 1, a man who can turn his body into steel blades. Miss Doublefinger, who can grow needles from her body. And others. They are all formidable devil fruit users in their own right. She paused. And then there's Mr. 2, Bon Clay. His clone fruit allows him to perfectly mimic the appearance of anyone he's touched. He is Crocodile's master of infiltration and deception. Naruto's eyes lit up with interest. So he's a spy who can look like anyone. Sounds familiar. He thought of his own transformation jutsu, a lifetime ago. Okay, so we can't fight our way in. We need to be smarter. What's Crocodile's goal? The weapon, Pluton. He can't get to it without the poneglyph. And he can't get to the poneglyph without me. Robin stopped, turning to him fully. What do you mean? Without you. You're the only one who can read them, right? He asked. He needs you. He thinks you betrayed him, but he doesn't know why. He doesn't know about me. He thinks you're just a rogue agent. A plan began to form in her mind, intricate and dangerous. So I become the bait. Nope, Naruto said immediately, shaking his head. We're a team. No one is bait. We use his assumptions against him. You're not bait. You're the Trojan horse. You return to him, claim you were laying low, that you found something he needs. You get us inside, while you distract him. I find his little utopia plan and burn it to the ground. It was a reckless, audacious plan, built on a foundation of trust that she had done nothing to earn. He was placing his life, and the fate of their mission, entirely on the assumption that she wouldn't betray him the moment she was back in Crocodile's presence. You would trust me that much? She asked, her voice quiet. You haven't given me a reason not to. He replied simply. Have you? She held his gaze, the endless blue of his eyes showing no hint of doubt, no trace of suspicion. Just a simple, unwavering faith. For the second time that day, a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the sun. No, she said softly. I haven't. Rainbase was an insult to the dying land around it. A riot of neon and gold, it rose from the desert like a gaudy mirage, its fountains gushing with water that the rest of the country bled for. The streets were filled with wealthy merchants and boisterous pirates, their laughter a jarring counterpoint to the silent suffering beyond the city walls. They entered the Rain Dinners casino, and the assault on the senses intensified. The air was thick with smoke and perfume, the cacophony of slot machines and roulette wheels a constant roar. Robin, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress she'd procured, moved through the crowd with a familiar, predatory grace. She was Miss All Sunday again. Her face an unreadable mask of cool confidence. Naruto, in a dark traveler's cloak, was her shadow, his presence muted, his senses on high alert. He could feel the greed, the desperation, the false joy in the room. It all felt hollow. Robin approached a pit boss in the high-stakes poker room. I need to see the owner, she said, her voice low and firm. The pit boss, a man with the neck of a bull and the eyes of a shark, sneered. The owner doesn't take appointments. Get lost. Robin leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Tell Mr. Zero that Miss All Sunday has returned. And tell him, I've found a key to the Tomb of the Kings. The man's eyes widened. He paled, nodded curtly, and hurried away. Moments later, they were being escorted toward a golden elevator at the back of the room, flanked by 2 towering guards in sharp suits. As they walked, a dancer with a flamboyant swan-themed outfit and a painted face pirouetted past them, bumping into Naruto. Oh, my apologies, handsome. The dancer chirped, his voice high and theatrical. He tapped Naruto's shoulder with a painted fingernail. Gomen Nasai. Naruto just nodded, his eyes scanning the room, but in that brief moment of contact, he felt it. A flicker of something unnatural, a ripple in the man's life force. His shinobi senses screamed trap. The guards led them into the elevator. The doors closed, and the golden cage began to descend. It was a long ride down, into the bowels of the earth. The air grew cooler, the silence more profound. When the doors opened, they were in a vast, opulent chamber. Water the casino's fountains cascaded down the walls into a large pool filled with giant, fearsome bananawanis, crocodiles with banana-like growths on their heads. In the center of the room, on a raised dais, sat a man. Sir Crocodile was larger than Naruto had expected, with a jagged scar crossing his face and a massive golden hook where his left hand should be. A thick cigar smoldered in his right hand, and his eyes, heavy-lidded and cold, regarded them with a predatory stillness. He exuded an aura of absolute, contemptuous power. Miss All Sunday, he rumbled, his voice like stones grinding together. To what do I owe this unexpected and, I must say, unwelcome reunion? I trust you have a very good reason for abandoning your post and costing me a dozen good men. Robin stepped forward, her composure perfect. I was pursuing a lead. Mr. Zero. A crucial one. The location of the poneglyph is not enough. We need a way to bypass the tomb's guardians. I believe I've found it. Crocodile's eyes narrowed, a flicker of interest warring with his deep-seated suspicion. Is that so? And this, pet of yours? He asked, his gaze shifting to Naruto, who remained silent in the background, his face shadowed by his hood. Suddenly, the golden elevator doors behind them slid open again. Standing there was another crocodile, identical in every way, a cruel smile playing on his lips. And beside him stood another Naruto. I'm afraid your little ruse is over, Miss All Sunday, the new crocodile said, his voice a perfect imitation. The crocodile on the dais dissolved into a swirl of sand, which reformed in. To the flamboyant dancer from the casino floor, Mr. 2. Bon Clay. The Naruto standing beside the new crocodile grinned, his form melting and shifting until he too was revealed to be Mr. 2. A clever double bluff. The real crocodile stepped out of the elevator, a cloud of cigar smoke wreathing his head. Did you really think I was so foolish? He sneered. I knew you were here the moment you stepped into my city. Mr. 2 here was just confirming my suspicions. His cold eyes fixed on Naruto. Now, who are you? And why are you foolish enough to ally yourself with a traitor? Robin's blood ran cold. His plan had failed before it had even begun. They were trapped, 100 feet underground, with a warlord and his most dangerous officer. Naruto, however, didn't look surprised. He didn't even look worried. He just sighed, a sound of mild disappointment. You know, he said, pulling back his hood, his blonde hair seeming to shine in the dim light. I really hoped we could do this the smart way. He looked at Robin. Plan B. She stared at him, bewildered. We don't have a plan B. Sure we do, he said with a brilliant, confident grin. Plan B is we hit them until they stop moving. Crocodile let out a low, dangerous laugh. You have courage, boy. I'll give you that. A shame I'll have to drain you into a dried out husk for it. He raised his hook. Mr. 2, the woman is yours. The boy is mine. Bon Clay, cackling, launched himself at Robin, his body a whirlwind of kicks and pirouettes. Okama Kenpo. But he never reached her. Naruto moved. He didn't dissolve into light or move at impossible speeds. He just took one deliberate step, putting himself between Robin and the attacker. He raised a single hand. I don't think so, he said. From his palm erupted a blinding, fan-shaped wave of pure, white light. It wasn't an attack, it was a statement. It slammed into Bon Clay like a physical wall, sending him tumbling head over heels across the room to land in a heap at the edge of the Bananawani pool. Crocodile's sneer froze on his face. He had felt the power in that blast. Not hockey, not the energy of any devil fruit he recognized. It was raw, primordial, and utterly overwhelming. What is that power? He demanded, his voice losing its arrogant edge for the first time. Me, Naruto said, his body beginning to emit a low, golden glow. The air in the cavern grew warmer, the damp chill receding. He turned to face the warlord, and his blue eyes burned with the intensity of twin suns. You've hurt these people, you've lied to them, starved them, and turned them against their king. You've made this beautiful land bleed for your own greed. He took a step forward, the stone floor beneath his feet beginning to glow faintly. I'm the guy who's going to make you pay for it. Croc. Odile's face twisted into a mask of rage. He was a warlord of the sea, a king of the desert. He would not be challenged by some unknown child in his own throne room. He lunged forward, his body dissolving into a swirling vortex of sand. His hook aimed at Naruto's heart. Desert Spada. A blade of hardened sand shot towards Naruto. Naruto didn't move to dodge. He simply held up his hand again. The sand blade struck his palm and stopped. The sand, superheated in an instant by the sheer thermal energy emanating from his skin, fused together, turning from a deadly weapon into a lump of rough, blackened glass. Naruto closed his hand, and the glass sword shattered into 1,000 pieces. He looked past the stunned warlord, his eyes locking on Robin, who stood watching, her heart hammering against her ribs. He gave her a wink. Go, he said. Find what you need, I'll keep them busy. Then he turned back to the utterly dumbfounded crocodile, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. Now then, where were we? Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Glass and Gold. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the vast, subterranean cavern, a sharp, crystalline note against the gurgle of the Bananawani pool. Sir Crocodile stared at the glittering dust that had been his Suna no Mi's ultimate attack, his face a mask of disbelief. The boy hadn't dodged, he hadn't even flinched, he had simply held up a hand and unmade the warlord's power with a casual, insulting ease. Turning my sand to glass, Crocodile's voice was a low, dangerous growl. He was recalculating, his sharp, analytical mind processing the impossible. An interesting trick. You must have some variation of a heat-based fruit. Magu magu no mi, perhaps. No, the heat is too clean, too radiant. He took a slow, deliberate puff of his cigar, the tip glowing like a demon's eye in the dim light. It doesn't matter. There are other ways to dry out a skin. He vanished, not with speed, but by dissolving completely into the sand that made up the floor of the cavern. A floor he had meticulously laid himself. Naruto's senses, a hybrid of shinobi training and his new, divine awareness, flared. The entire room was the enemy. Robin didn't hesitate. As Crocodile's attention focused entirely on Naruto, she spun on her heel and melted into the shadows of a grand, carved stone archway, moving with the silent, practiced grace of a lifetime spent in hiding. Naruto's instruction had been simple, go. It was an order born of absolute trust, and it settled in her heart like a warm, heavy stone. She would not fail him. Back in the main chamber, the ground began to shift. The sand rose up not as a man, but as a wave, a crashing tsunami of grit and stone aimed to engulf and crush Naruto. Naruto laughed, a bright, clear sound that was utterly out of place in the grim tomb. You think a little sand is going to scare me? I'm from a desert village. Well, a village surrounded by a forest, but we had a desert. It was very sandy. He stomped his foot. It wasn't a physical blow. It was a release of energy. A perfect circle of light, a miniature sun, exploded outward from him across the floor. The wave of sand it touched instantly vitrified, turning into a massive, glittering wall of black glass, its forward momentum frozen. The rest of the sand collapsed uselessly around it. From behind the new glass wall, Crocodile's voice echoed, laced with a new, sharper fury. Cute. You're a living furnace. But every fire needs fuel. Let's see how you burn when you have no water left. A hand made of sand erupted from the floor at Naruto's feet, grabbing his ankle. It wasn't a crushing grip. It was a thirsty one. Naruto felt a strange, pulling sensation, the signature of Crocodile's moisture-draining ability. He felt the power latch onto him, seeking to draw out every drop of liquid, to reduce him to a mummified husk. And then, Crocodile screamed. It was not a cry of triumph. It was a raw, agonized shriek of pure, unadulterated pain. The sand hand attached to Naruto's ankle began to glow, first red, then a blinding white gold. The sand wasn't just turning to glass, it was being superheated to the point of molecular breakdown. The connection was a two-way street. Crocodile had tried to drain the moisture from a star. A column of sand erupted 20 feet away, reforming into the warlord. He stumbled back, clutching his right arm, which was smoking and blackened even in its sand form. He stared at Naruto, his arrogant composure finally and completely shattered, replaced by a mixture of raw hatred and, for the first time in decades, a sliver of genuine fear. "What are you?" he snarled, the words a pained rasp. "What devil made you?" Naruto's body was now glowing with a steady, golden aura, the light pouring off him in gentle, shimmering waves. The cavern, once dim and foreboding, was now illuminated as if by a rising sun. "You've got it all wrong, Croc," Naruto said, his voice quiet but ringing with power. "My power isn't about heat. That's just a side effect." He took a step forward, and the glass floor beneath him began to melt, turning into a pool of glowing, molten gold. "My power is about light. About life. The very thing you've been trying to snuff out in this country." He took another step, and the light intensified. "You try to drain me. You're just pulling more energy into the furnace. You try to crush me. You're just giving me more material to reshape. You can't beat me, because you represent everything my power exists to burn away." From the far side of the room, where he had been recovering, Mr. 2. Bon Clay watched with wide, terrified eyes. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. He had to help. With a theatrical cry, he leapt back into the fray, his leg extended for a powerful kick. He was intercepted by a blur of motion. A tall, impossibly calm man with a shaven head and a prominent one tattooed on his chest stepped in front of him. It was Mr. 1. Daz Bones. "Stay out of this, Mr. 2. Daz Bones said, his voice flat and metallic. He didn't even look at Bon Clay, his entire focus on the glowing figure of Naruto. "The boss is in trouble. This is a job for a true professional." Mr. 1. Bon Clay cried with relief. "This opponent is different," Daz Bones continued, his hands morphing into long, wickedly sharp blades of gleaming steel. He began to walk forward, his steps heavy and measured. "Spar Claw. His power seems to be heat and light. But steel can withstand immense heat. I will cut him down." Crocodile saw his most powerful subordinate step in, and a flicker of his old arrogance returned. "Excellent, Mr. 1. Carve him into pieces. I will deal with the traitorous woman." But Naruto was already moving. He wasn't going to let them separate, wasn't going to let Robin be hunted. "Oh no, you don't. You're both staying right here. With me." He clapped his hands together. Solar flare. It wasn't an attack, it was a diversion. The entire cavern was filled with a blast of pure, harmless, but utterly blinding white light. Crocodile and Daz Bones cried out, shielding their eyes, their vision completely whited out. When the spots cleared a second later, Naruto was gone from the center of the room. Daz Bones' eyes narrowed, his senses on high alert. "He's fast. He's a trickster," Crocodile snarled, reforming his sand body. "Find him. He can't hide from me in here." A voice came from directly above them. "Who's hiding?" They looked up. Naruto was floating, 20 feet in the air, held aloft by a controlled, downward thrust of light and heat. He hung in the air like an avenging angel, his golden aura illuminating the entire chamber. "Now," Naruto said, a grin spreading across his face. "Let's try this again." Robin moved through a corridor of polished marble and cold, opulent tapestries. The distant sounds of the battle, the roar of sand, the hiss of superheating glass, Crocodile's enraged shouts, were a strange, reassuring drumbeat at her back. He was holding them. He was buying her time. The weight of that trust was a fire in her veins. She was not just looking for the poneglyph anymore. She was looking for proof. The key to dismantling Crocodile's entire operation and saving Alabasta from his utopia. Her mind, a library of Baroque works intelligence, sifted through blueprints and security rotations she had been privy to. Crocodile was arrogant, but he was also a creature of habit. He would keep his most important secrets close, in a place that represented his power. His study. She found it behind a wall disguised as a bookshelf, a classic and insultingly simple trick. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the casino's gaudy exterior. It was a scholar's room, lined with ancient texts and stolen historical artifacts. A massive desk carved from dark, petrified wood dominated the center, and on it, laid out under a bright lamp, was a map of Alabasta. It was covered in markings, troop movements, both rebel and royal, weather patterns, meticulously tracked, and a series of red circles, marking locations for Baroque works operations. But one location was circled several times, with a star drawn in the center, the great central plaza of the capital, Alubarna. Beside it was a note, scrawled in Crocodile's arrogant hand. The final act. The king fires on his own people. Utopia begins. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just letting the two sides destroy each other. He was planning a false flag operation on a massive scale. A final, unforgivable atrocity to utterly destroy the royal family's name forever. As she absorbed the horrifying truth, a sweet, cloying scent filled the air. Perfume. Well now, look what the cat dragged in, a sultry voice purred from the shadows. I always knew you were a snake, Miss All Sunday. I just didn't think you'd be stupid enough to come back to the nest. Robin turned slowly. Leaning against a sarcophagus in the corner was a woman with spiky blue hair, wearing a revealing outfit covered in sharp points. Miss Doublefinger, Zala, user of the Toge no Mi. Needles sprouted from her fingertips, long and sharp as stilettos. I'm simply tidying up loose ends, Robin said, her own voice dropping back into the cool, detached tone of her old persona. She crossed her arms, a subtle, preparatory movement. The only loose end I see is you, Miss Doublefinger sneered, and lunged. She was a whirlwind of sharp points. Her body a living weapon. Stinger flail. Her arms became blurs, sending 1,000 needle-sharp spikes shooting toward Robin. Robin didn't move an inch. Ocho flip. 8 arms sprouted from Miss Doublefinger's own back. They didn't grab her. They appeared just behind her knees and at her shoulders, and in a single, coordinated motion, they flipped her, sending her tumbling uncontrollably through the air. The volley of spikes she had fired shot harmlessly into the ceiling. She landed hard, rolling to her feet with a snarl, but Robin was already pressing the attack. Trying to strangle. 30 arms erupted from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, a forest of limbs that converged on Miss Doublefinger. They wrapped around her arms, her legs, her torso, pinning her completely. Several hands clamped over her mouth, silencing her, while others grabbed her head, holding it immobile. She was caught, a fly in a spider's web. Robin walked toward her captive, her face a cold, unreadable mask. She had fought and manipulated people like Zala her whole life. She knew their weaknesses. They were bullies, reliant on their power to intimidate. Once that power was neutralized, they crumbled. Where is the bomb? Robin asked, her voice a deadly whisper. Miss Doublefinger's eyes widened in fear and surprise above the hands covering her face. The one for the plaza in Alubarna. Robin continued, her voice patient, yet utterly menacing. Crocodile is a man of contingencies. He wouldn't use a simple cannon. It will be something big. Something he can't afford to have traced back to him. Where is it? There was no answer, only a muffled defiance. Robin sighed. I truly hoped you would be reasonable. She looked at the arms holding Miss Doublefinger's head. Hang. 2 arms sprouted from Zala's shoulders, their fingers extending and sharpening into hard, chitinous points. They moved slowly, deliberately, positioning themselves directly over her eyes. I can make you blind, Robin said, her voice devoid of all emotion. And then I can start breaking bones. One by one. I have a very thorough understanding of anatomy. We can be here for hours. Or, you can tell me where the bomb is. Terror, pure and undiluted, finally broke through the assassin's bravado. She began to struggle, to nod frantically. Robin gestured, and the Han.DS moved away from Miss Doublefinger's mouth. The clock tower. Zala gasped, tears streaming down her face. In the main plaza. It's huge, a special design from the New World. It's set to go off when the battle reaches its peak. The blast radius is 5 kilometers. 5 kilometers. The entire city. Robin's eyes hardened. She had what she needed. Thank you for your cooperation. Clutch. There was a sharp, final crack. Miss Doublefinger went limp, unconscious. Robin left her there, a tangled puppet in a web of her own limbs, and turned back to the map. Her mind was racing. Naruto was fighting the warlord. The rebel army was marching on the capital. And a bomb powerful enough to level the city was counting down. The scope of Crocodile's treachery was larger than she had ever imagined. She had to warn him. She had to stop it. For the first time, she wasn't just trying to survive. She was trying to save everyone. The battle in the cavern had devolved into a whirlwind of gold, sand, and steel. Naruto was a comet, a being of pure energy, clashing against two of the Grand Line's most dangerous killers. Daz Bones was a relentless machine, his bladed body a constant threat. He couldn't be burned easily. His steel deflecting Naruto's less focused heat attacks. Crocodile was the cunning serpent, using the entire room as his weapon, creating sand pits, launching dehydrated blades of sand, always trying to land a single moisture-stealing touch. Naruto was in his element. It was like the old days, sparring with Kakashi and Sasuke, a chaotic dance of feints and overwhelming power. Spiral hollow. Daz Bones yelled, his arms turning into spinning drills of death as he charged. Sables. Crocodile roared, launching a miniature, focused sandstorm from his palm. Naruto met them both at once. He dropped to the floor, slamming his palms down. Corona shield. A dome of solid, golden light erupted around him. Daz Bones's steel drills ground against it, sending up a shower of sparks, unable to penetrate. Crocodile's sandstorm hit the dome and was instantly incinerated, the sand particles turning to a fine, glassy dust that rained down harmlessly. Inside the dome, Naruto took a breath. He wasn't tired, but he was getting annoyed. This was taking too long. It was time to end it. He let the dome drop. As his opponents recoiled from the sudden flash, he moved. He appeared in front of Daz Bones, not with a fist, but with an open hand. He didn't try to break the steel. He simply placed his glowing palm flat against the man's chest. Conduction. It wasn't a blast of heat. It was a transfer. He poured pure, solar energy directly into Daz Bones's steel body. Daz Bones's eyes went wide as he felt his entire body heat up, uncontrollably. First red hot, then white hot. His own metallic form became a prison, a forge cooking him from the inside out. He screamed, a muffled, agonized sound, as the heat became too much, and he collapsed, his body glowing like an ingot, completely incapacitated. One down. Naruto turned to Crocodile, whose face was a canvas of disbelief and fury. It's over, Naruto said. Your plan is finished. Nothing is finished. Crocodile roared, his rage pushing him past his fear. He gathered all the sand in the cavern, pulling it toward himself, creating a massive, swirling vortex. His final, desperate attack. Ground Sekko. Ground Death. The Veer. Why Earth split open as he drew moisture from it, creating a spreading desert of death that cracked the foundations of the casino. Naruto simply shook his head. He raised his hand, index finger pointed at the sky. He gathered the light, the warmth, the very concept of the sun, into a single, infinitesimally small point at his fingertip. The golden aura around him receded, drawn into that one point until it shone with the intensity of a neutron star. The entire cavern was plunged into a sudden, deep twilight, all light swallowed by that single point. You wanted to see my power. Naruto's voice was calm, absolute. You wanted to know what kind of devil made me. The point of light on his finger pulsed, and he brought his hand down, aiming at the raging warlord. I am Uzumaki Naruto. He flicked his finger. And I am my own kind of sun. A beam of light, no thicker than a wire, shot forth. It was not hot. It was not explosive. It was absolute. It struck Crocodile, and the warlord simply stopped. The raging sandstorm collapsed. His sand body froze, every grain of it locked in place. The light had pierced through his Logia nature, not by burning it, but by imposing a new state of being. Every grain of sand that made up his body was instantly, perfectly, and permanently encased in a shell of transparent, unbreakable glass. He was a statue, a life-sized, perfect sculpture of Sir Crocodile in his moment of ultimate rage. Trapped within himself, conscious, but unable to move, unable to dissolve, unable to do anything but stare out at the boy who had defeated him. The silence in the cavern was profound. Naruto stood over his two defeated opponents, the golden aura slowly returning to him. He had won. It was then that Robin burst back into the room, her face pale, her eyes wide with urgency. "Naruto," she cried, her voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "It's a bomb. In the capital's clock tower. It's big enough to destroy the entire city." Naruto's victory felt hollow, the adrenaline turning to ice in his veins. He had cut off the head of the snake, but the venom was already spreading. The final act had already begun. Miles away, on the silent, black deck of the Veritas, Inquisitor Samael watched a series of pulsing lights on a holographic map. One, a brilliant gold, had just flared with an intensity that made the technician beside him gasp. Another, a murky brown, had just been extinguished. "Sir," the technician said, his voice trembling. "The energy signature, it's off the charts. Warlord Crocodile's vital signs, they've vanished." Samael didn't react. He simply took a sip of his tea, his pale gray eyes fixed on the golden light that represented Naruto. "He consumes a warlord, and his own output barely fluctuates," Samael murmured to himself, a hint of academic admiration in his tone. "Like a star consuming a planet. Utterly efficient." He placed his cup down. "The hammer has been broken. The test is over." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to Fleet Admiral Sakazuki. Inform him that the warlord Crocodile has been neutralized by the heretic, Icarus. Inform him that the situation in Alabasta is a threat to the world balance." He paused, a thin, chilling smile gracing his lips. "And inform him that per the Godslayer protocol, I am formally requesting a buster call." The officer's blood ran cold. "A buster call, sir. On Alabasta, the heresy must be purged," Samael said, his voice as calm and final as a death sentence. "Let the world see what happens when mortals dare to touch the sun." Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Sun and the Bomb. The silence in the cavern was the silence of a tomb. Crocodile stood as a monument to his own arrogance, a glass statue in a room of shattered sand and steel. The victory was absolute, but the echo of Robin's warning, a bomb big enough to destroy the entire city, turned the triumph to ash in Naruto's mouth. Then the tomb began to die. A deep, groaning shudder ran through the stone beneath their feet. Crocodile's final, desperate attack, the ground death, had fractured the very foundations of his underground lair. Cracks spider-webbed across the floor, and the ceiling began to shed dust, then stones. Then massive chunks of rock. The Bananawani pool churned as the walls containing it buckled and split. "Time to go," Naruto yelled, grabbing Robin's arm. He didn't hesitate, didn't look for an exit. He made one. He pointed a hand at the ceiling, directly below the casino floor. Shortcut. A concentrated beam of golden light, no thicker than his wrist, lanced upward. It didn't explode. It simply vaporized a path through 50 feet of solid rock and the casino's marble floor, creating a perfectly round, glowing tunnel leading straight up into the pandemonium of the main gaming hall. He wrapped an arm around Robin's waist, pulling her close. "Hold your breath." Before she could protest, he leapt. Light and heat erupted from the soles of his feet, a controlled, powerful thrust that shot them up through the newly made tunnel like a human cannonball. They burst through the floor of the casino in a shower of molten rock and confused gamblers. The whole building was shaking violently. Slot machines toppling over, chandeliers swinging like pendulums. People were screaming, stampeding for the exits. "This way," Robin shouted over the roar, pointing toward a service exit she knew from her time here. They ran, Naruto carving a path through the chaos. A massive, gilded statue of Crocodile toppled toward them, threatening to block their path. Naruto didn't break stride. He threw out a hand, and a shockwave of pure, kinetic light struck the statue mid-fall, blasting it into 1,000 glittering pieces that rained down harmlessly. They burst out of a side door into the garish, neon-lit streets of Rainbase just as the entire Rain Dinner's casino collapsed in on itself with a deafening, earth-shattering roar, sinking into the desert and taking its glass king with it. A plume of dust and sand rose 1,000 feet into the air, a gravestone for a warlord's ambition. They didn't stop. They kept running, putting distance between themselves and the ruin. When they finally skidded to a halt in a deserted alleyway on the edge of the city, the only sounds were their own ragged breaths and the distant screams of the panicked populace. Robin leaned against a wall, her mind racing, processing the impossible sequence of events. Alubarna is over 100 miles from here, across the Sandora Desert. The rebel army is already there. Even if we could find transport. We don't have time for transport, Naruto said, his gaze already fixed on the eastern horizon, toward the unseen capital. He looked at her, his blue eyes deadly serious. How fast can you think? What? I can get us there, he said. A wild, brilliant idea taking shape in his mind. But it's not going to be a smooth ride. I'll need you to navigate. On the fly, at about 200 miles an hour. She stared at him, caught between disbelief and the dawning realization that with him, the normal rules of the world no longer applied. I can do that. Good. He stomped on the sandy ground, focusing his power. The sand beneath their feet swirled, heated, and fused into a flat, circular disk of smooth, black obsidian about 10 feet in diameter. It hovered an inch off the ground, humming with a contained energy. He stepped onto it and held out a hand to her. Your chariot awaits, milady. She took his hand, her fingers wrapping around his. His skin was warm, radiating a steady, comforting energy. He pulled her onto the disc beside him. Hold on tight, he said, his grin a flash of pure, unadulterated confidence. He placed his feet wide, taking a low stance. A shimmering, semi-transparent, errant dome of golden light formed around them, enclosing them and the disc. Then, from the back of the disc, a jet of white-hot plasma erupted, a controlled, silent engine of pure solar power. The disc shot forward, accelerating from zero to a blur in less than a second. The city of Rainbase vanished behind them in a heartbeat. They were a golden meteor, streaking across the desert under the pale light of the moon. Inside the dome of light, there was no wind, no sound, only the hum of Naruto's power and the astonishing, terrifying sight of the dunes blurring past them at an impossible speed. Robin, a map held tight in her hands, found her voice. A little to the left, she yelled, pointing at a massive rock formation. There's a canyon that will cut the distance by 10 miles. Naruto adjusted their trajectory with a thought. The disc banking like a fighter jet. This was insane. It was brilliant. It was working. The sheer, exhilarating speed was a distraction, but the grim reality of their mission settled back in. A city full of people, 2 armies about to slaughter each other, and a bomb at the heart of it all. This is my fault, Robin said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the energy shield. Naruto glanced at her. Her face was cast in the golden light of the dome, her expression etched with a guilt so profound it was a physical presence. I helped him, she continued, her gaze fixed on the rushing sand outside. I knew what he was capable of. I fed him information, helped him manipulate the government, the people. I did it all just to get to the poneglyph. For knowledge. I traded a kingdom for a history lesson. You didn't plant that bomb, Naruto said, his voice firm, cutting through her self-recrimination. You didn't start the rebellion. You were a player in his game. But you aren't the one who built the board. It doesn't absolve me. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Nothing absolves us of our past. We just have to build a better future. Right now, that means stopping a bomb and saving a few 100,000 people. We can figure out the rest later. His simple, straightforward morality was a foreign concept to her. In her world, survival was the only virtue. Yet, his unwavering belief in doing the right thing, not because it was easy or safe, but simply because it was right, was infectious. It made her feel, for the first time, had her own sordid past was not a life sentence. As they streaked across the desert, a faint, rhythmic sound began to reach them, even through the energy shield. A deep, mechanical thrumming. Naruto looked up. High above, silhouetted against the star-dusted sky, were ships. 10 of them, massive, gray marine warships, sailing not on the sea, but in the air, held aloft by some unknown technology. They were moving in a perfect, implacable formation, heading for the same destination as them. Alabasta. Robin followed his gaze, and all the color drained from her face. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a deep, primal terror that Naruto had never seen in her before. "No," she whispered, the single word choked with a lifetime of fear. "Oh, no, what is it?" Naruto asked, slowing the disc, his own senses on high alert. "More of Samael's friends. It's a buster call," she said, her voice trembling. 10 warships. 1 vice admiral. It's the world government's ultimate sanction. They aren't coming to restore order. They're coming to erase Alabasta from the map. They did it to my home, Ohara. They burned it to the ground, killed everyone I ever knew, just to hide the secrets of the poneglyphs. The historian's detachment was gone, replaced by the raw, unfiltered terror of the 8-year-old girl who had watched her world burn. Naruto looked from her horrified face to the fleet of warships, and a cold, hard anger settled in his gut. Samael. This was his doing. He had lost his hammer, so now he was bringing down the whole forge. He reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Robin. They are not going to burn this island. They are not going to hurt these people. I won't let them." He squeezed her shoulder, his warmth a small anchor in her sea of terror. "I promise." She looked into his eyes, and in their burning blue depths, she saw not arrogance, not bravado, but an absolute, unshakable certainty. She took a ragged breath, pushing down the ghosts of her past, and nodded. "The capital is just beyond that ridge," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "We're almost there." Naruto nodded, his own expression hardening into a grim mask of determination. He pushed their speed to its absolute limit, the golden meteor of their passage a silent defiance against the dark fleet gathering in the sky above. They arrived at Alubarna, to a city consumed by the madness of war. The rebel army, a wave of desperate, sunburnt men and women, crashed against the fortified walls of the city. The royal army, disciplined and grim-faced, held the line. Cannons roared, gunfire crackled, the screams of the wounded and dying filled the air. It was a symphony of chaos and tragedy, a nation devouring itself. Their disk of glass dissolved into sand behind them as they landed in a deserted street on the outskirts of the battle. The ground shook with the force of explosions. The main plaza is in the center of the city. Robin yelled over the din. "The clock tower is the tallest structure. We can't miss it." They ran, a 2-person army against a backdrop of war. They were a ghost, a blur of motion through the side streets and alleyways, avoiding the main thoroughfares where the fighting was thickest. A stray cannonball arced toward them. Naruto simply swatted it out of the air with a backhand, the iron ball flying off into a building with a crash. A squad of rebel soldiers rounded a corner, their rifles raised. Before they could even register their presence, Naruto flared his golden aura for a split second, a silent, blinding flash that left them staggering and disoriented as he and Robin sped past. They burst into the main plaza, and the scale of the chaos hit them with the force of a physical blow. Thousands of soldiers were locked in brutal, close-quarters combat. The ground was littered with the fallen, and in the center of it all, dominating the skyline, was the clock tower. It was a magnificent, ornate structure, but a cold dread emanated from it. The base of the tower was not unguarded. Standing before the main entrance was a bizarre and menacing duo. A large, slow-moving man with a bat that seemed to weigh 4 tons, and a woman burrowing through the ground like a mole, a cloud of dust marking her movements. Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas. Crocodile's last line of defense. "No time to talk our way past these two," Naruto said. His eyes already locked on the tower. "I'll handle the woman," Robin said, her arms already crossed. "The big one is slow, but that bat is unconventional." "Got it," Naruto said. "Meet you at the top." Miss Merry Christmas burst from the ground, her face twisted in a mocking grin. "Well, if it isn't the traitor. Did you come to watch the fireworks?" She dove back underground. Mr. 4, in a slow, monotone voice, said, "The boss said to stop anyone. So we will stop you." He hefted his massive bat. Robin's eyes darted around, tracking the disturbed earth that marked Miss Merry Christmas's subterranean path. "Cease fleur," 6 arms erupted from the ground in a circle, their hands open. Slap. They began slapping the ground randomly, turning the mole woman's game into a painful, renting ordeal as she was battered from all sides. Naruto ignored the bizarre sideshow. He walked directly toward Mr. 4. The big man swung his 4-ton bat, a weapon that could pulverize granite, in a whistling, deadly arc. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply caught it. His palm met the steel, and the titanic force of the blow just stopped. The air cracked from the impact, but Naruto didn't even slide back an inch. Mr. 4's dull eyes widened in shock. Too slow, Naruto said. He tightened his grip. The metal of the bat began to glow red, then white, melting like butter in his hand. He pushed, and the molten slag and the man attached to it were sent flying backward, crashing into the plaza wall with enough force to crack the stone. He didn't spare him a second glance. He looked up at the clock tower, a 100-foot climb. He crouched, his power gathering in his legs. He wasn't going to take the stairs. With an explosive release of energy, he launched himself upward, a golden rocket ascending the side of the tower. He landed on the high balcony just below the clock face as Robin, having trapped Miss Merry Christmas in a series of bone-breaking holds, sprinted through the tower's now unguarded entrance. He smashed through the ornate doors into the clock's main chamber. And there it was. It was massive, far larger than a normal cannon shell. It was a sphere of polished black steel, COV. In complex wiring and glowing blue runes, cradled in the heart of the clock's machinery. It hummed with a malevolent, contained power. And on its side, a digital timer in stark, blood-red numerals was counting down. 0 hours 3 minutes and 0 seconds. Robin burst into the room behind him, taking in the scene with a sharp, horrified gasp. 3 minutes. 3 minutes until Alubarna, its people, its armies, its history, were reduced to a crater of smoking glass. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Skyfall. 3 minutes. 180 seconds until the heart of Alabasta was vaporized. The red numerals on the bomb's display were a merciless, ticking countdown to oblivion. Outside, the sounds of the Civil War raged on, a soundtrack for the apocalypse, the combatants below blissfully unaware that their struggles, their hatred, and their lives were about to be rendered utterly meaningless. Naruto didn't waste a second on shock. He was a creature of action, his mind already dissecting the problem. Robin, can you disarm it? Robin was already at the bomb's casing, her eyes scanning the complex array of wires and glowing runes. Her intellect was a formidable weapon, but this was technology she had only read about in Crocodile's most secret files. A masterpiece of destruction imported from a mad scientist in the New World. The wiring is a decoy. It's the runes. It's a sequence lock. A wrong move and it detonates instantly. Her voice was tight, strained with an intensity that bordered on panic. I need time to translate them. Time we don't have. 0 hours 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Then we don't disarm it, Naruto said, his voice a blade of calm in the storm of ticking tension. We move it. He placed his hands on the cool, black steel of the bomb. It was immense, weighing several tons, and deeply embedded in the clock's machinery. He braced himself, his muscles tensing, the golden aura around him flaring to life. With a roar that seemed to shake the very stones of the tower, he began to lift. Metal groaned, gears shrieked, and the entire clock face shuddered. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, he ripped the bomb free from its cradle. The sheer, raw power required was monumental, but it was nothing compared to the gentle, unstoppable force of the sun he now commanded. He heaved the massive sphere onto his shoulder, his knees buckling slightly under the sudden weight. Okay, he grunted, his eyes fixed on the open balcony. I'm going to throw it. Straight up, as high as I can. Robin's eyes widened in horror as she understood his terrifyingly simple plan. The blast radius is 5 kilometers. Even at the peak of its arc, it will still incinerate the city. I'm not going to let it fall back down, he said, and the look in his eyes was one of utter, terrifying resolve. I'm going up after it. 0 hours 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Before she could argue, before her mind could even fully process the suicidal implications of his words, he was moving. He sprinted for the balcony, the multi-ton bomb a grotesque parody of an Olympic shot put on his shoulder. He burst out into the open air, 100 feet above the raging battle in the plaza. For a brief, surreal moment, a few of the combatants below looked up. They saw a figure of golden light, holding a sphere of black death against the sky. A demon, a god. Before they could decide, he acted. With a final, explosive roar that tore from the depths of his soul, Naruto hurled the bomb. It wasn't a throw born of muscle, but of pure, focused power. A wave of kinetic energy propelled the sphere upward, sending it screaming into the sky, a black speck shrinking against the vast, unforgiving blue. He didn't watch it go. He leapt from the balcony. He didn't fall. He flew. A torrent of golden plasma erupted from his hands and feet, a controlled, violent propulsion that shot him into the air after the bomb. A human missile chasing a doomsday device into the heavens. Robin rushed to the edge of the balcony, her hand gripping the stone so tightly her knuckles were white. She watched him ascend, a golden comet on a collision course with fate. Her mind, the mind that had planned for every contingency, that had seen betrayal in every shadow, had no framework for this. For a self-sacrifice so absolute, so unquestioning. The world shrank for Naruto. There was only the blue of the sky and the black of the bomb. The wind screamed past him, a physical blow that he negated with a shimmering aura of light. He was moving faster than sound, the city of Alubarna a rapidly shrinking map below him. Higher and higher he climbed, his solar engine burning with a furious intensity. He was gaining on it. He could see the timer. Even from a distance. 0 hours 1 minute and 30 seconds. He pushed harder, pouring more of himself into the ascent, the star in his chest roaring like a caged supernova. He was a sun god, a child of Amaterasu, and the sky was his natural home. He felt a wild, exhilarating freedom in the flight, a stark contrast to the grim purpose of his mission. Far below, on the blood-soaked ground of the plaza, the battle began to falter. The sight of a man throwing a giant black ball into the sky and then chasing it on a pillar of fire was enough to momentarily halt even the most hate-filled combatants. Royal soldiers and rebel fighters alike lowered their weapons, their faces turned upward in stunned, collective disbelief. High above the clouds, where the air grew thin and cold, Naruto caught it. He intercepted the bomb at the apex of its arc, miles above the earth. The silence of the upper atmosphere was profound. He was floating in a sea of stars against the blackness of space, the planet a beautiful, curved jewel of blue and white below him. The bomb, now weightless in his hands, felt inert, harmless. But the red numbers told a different story. 0 hours 0 minutes and 50 seconds. He had a choice. He could simply let it go, let it detonate here, in the cold, empty void. But the blast, a 5-kilometer radius, was one thing on the ground. In the near vacuum of space, the thermal and radioactive fallout could be unpredictable. It could poison the upper atmosphere, raining down death on the island for weeks. It was a risk he wouldn't take. He had to contain it. He had to smother it. He pulled the bomb close, wrapping his arms around it, hugging the instrument of mass death to his chest. He closed his eyes, shutting out the stars, the planet, everything. He turned his focus inward, to the star in his soul. He began to shine. It started as a soft, golden glow, the same aura he had used in his fights. But this time, it didn't stop. It grew, brighter and brighter, the light pouring out of him not as an attack, but as a shield. He began to form a sphere of pure, solidified light around himself and the bomb, a shell of divine energy. 0 hours 0 minutes and 30 seconds. The sphere grew, layer by concentric layer. It was the most complex, most draining act he had ever attempted. He wasn't just creating light, he was weaving it, compressing it, giving it density and strength. He was building a cage out of sunshine. The energy drain was immense. He felt his reserves, which had seemed so limitless, begin to plummet. The pilot light in his chest flickered, the star within him groaning under the strain. For the first time since eating the fruit, he felt a limit to his power. And he was pushing far, far beyond it. 0 hours 0 minutes and 10 seconds. The sphere was complete, a perfect, golden orb, 100 meters in diameter, hanging silently in the void. Inside, at its very center, Naruto held the bomb, his own body now blazing with the white-hot intensity of a solar flare. 0 hours 0 minutes and 5 seconds. He poured every last drop of his will, his energy, his verses. life force into reinforcing the walls of his golden prison. 0 hours 0 minutes and 4 seconds. He thought of Robin, her face on the balcony, a mask of terror and a fragile, newfound hope. 0 hours 0 minutes and 3 seconds. He thought of the people below, fighting and dying over a lie. And the promise he had made to make it rain. 0 hours 0 minutes and 2 seconds. He thought of his old life, of Jiraiya, of his parents, of everyone who had believed in him. 0 hours 0 minutes and 1 second. He smiled. 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. From the surface of Alabasta, it was a miracle. A new star bloomed in the daytime sky. A brilliant, silent, golden sun that flared for a breathtaking second, brighter than the real sun, casting strange, sharp shadows across the desert. Every single person on the island, from the fighters in Alubarna to the villagers in the farthest oasis, stopped what they were doing and looked up in awe. Inside the golden sphere, hell was unleashed. The bomb detonated with a force that would have wiped a city from existence. But there was no sound, no shockwave. The entire cataclysmic force of T. He explosion was contained within Naruto's cage of light. The inner walls of the sphere buckled, the golden light flickering as it absorbed a universe of destructive energy. Naruto was at the heart of the blast. His body, his very being, took the full, unfiltered brunt of the explosion. The pain was absolute, a fire that consumed all thought, all sense. His own light was ripped away, his divine power shredded by the greater, more violent force. He felt his consciousness fray, his body dissolve. The golden star in the sky pulsed once, twice, and then it vanished. Silence returned to the heavens. Robin stood on the balcony, her neck craned, her eyes fixed on the spot where the light had been. She waited for a sign, for a streak of gold returning, for anything. But there was only the empty blue of the sky. The awe in the plaza below slowly turned to confusion, then to a dawning, terrible understanding. The fighting did not resume. The hatred, the anger that had fueled the war, seemed petty, insignificant. In the face of the celestial event they had just witnessed, they had been on the verge of mutual annihilation, and something, someone, had saved them from an enemy they didn't even know they had. A single tear traced a path through the dust on Robin's cheek. Then another. She did not sob. She did not scream. She stood as still as a statue, her heart a cold, dead stone in her chest. He had promised, and he had kept it. And it had cost him everything. High above, in the silent, cold darkness, the remnants of the explosion faded. And in the void, something remained. It was not a body. It was a flicker of light. A single, stubborn ember, the pilot light of a god's soul, refusing to be extinguished. It was weak, guttering, a bare spark of consciousness in an ocean of oblivion. It was Naruto. He had no body. He had no power. He was just a thought, a memory, the last echo of a promise. And he began to fall. He was a shooting star in reverse, a faint streak of gold arcing down through the atmosphere. Invisible to the naked eye, he fell for an eternity, his consciousness flickering in and out. As he hit the thicker air, the friction of his passage began to feed the ember. A faint warmth returned. A sliver of his power, drawn from the sun he was falling toward, trickled back into him. He didn't just fall. He was being pulled. A single, desperate wish, from a woman on a stone balcony, had become a lighthouse in the darkness of his fading mind. Come back. It was a whisper, a prayer, a demand. And it was enough. His light grew brighter. The falling ember became a spark, the spark a flame. The flame a blazing meteor. The people of Alubarna, still staring at the sky, gasped as a golden star, the same one that had saved them, reappeared, now streaking down toward the city. It wasn't aimed at the plaza. It was aimed at the clock tower. Robin saw it. Her breath caught in her throat. Hope, a feeling she had long since buried, erupted in her chest with a painful, violent force. The meteor crashed onto the balcony with the sound of a thunderclap, the stone cracking and groaning under the impact. The light was blinding, a miniature sun that forced Robin to shield her eyes. When it faded, he was there. He lay in the center of a blackened, glassy crater, his clothes gone, his body covered in strange, glowing golden patterns like the flares on the surface of the sun. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. He was whole. He had flown into the heart of an explosion and been unmade. And then the sun, and the desperate hope of a single person, had remade him. Robin rushed to his side, falling to her knees. She reached out a trembling hand, hesitating to touch him, as if he were a holy relic, a thing of impossible power. Naruto. His eyes fluttered open. The blue in them was faint, washed out, but it was there. He looked at her, and a weak, tired grin touched his lips. "Hey, Robin," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Did I miss anything?" She laughed, a sound that was half a sob, and the tears she had held back finally fell freely. She gently brushed the blonde hair from his forehead, her touch infinitely tender. "No," she whispered, "you're right on time." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the silent battlefield, a new sound filled the air. It wasn't the clash of steel or the roar of cannons. It was a gentle, rhythmic patter. A single drop of rain landed on Robin's cheek, mingling with her tears. Then another, and another. Across the city, across the entire parched kingdom of Alabasta, the sky opened up. A gentle, life-giving rain began to fall for the first time in 3 years. It washed the blood from the streets, the dust from the air, and the hatred from the hearts of the people. Naruto, lying on the stone balcony, felt the cool drops on his skin and smiled, a real, genuine smile of pure, unadulterated joy. He had kept his other promise, too. He had made it rain. Far out at sea, the Buster Call fleet, 10 black ships of the apocalypse, sailed toward the island. On the bridge of the flagship, a communications officer looked up from his console, his face pale. "Vice Admiral Onagumo, sir," he stammered. "Inquisitor Samael has just issued a new order." The Vice Admiral, a grim man with the demeanor of a spider, turned his cold eyes on the officer. "What is it?" He says to halt the Buster Call. Onagumo's eyes narrowed. "Halt it. On what grounds? The heretic is there." The Inquisitor's message was specific. "Sir," the officer said, swallowing hard. He said, and I quote, "The test subject has demonstrated the ability to neutralize a city-level explosive ordnance via self-contained, high-energy absorption. Firing on the island would be like trying to put out a grease fire with a nuke. It would only feed him. He has reclassified the Icarus target. He is no longer a heresy to be purged. He is a force to be contained." The Vice Admiral stared out at the island of Alabasta, now shrouded in a curtain of gentle, cleansing rain. A single being had neutralized a warlord, stopped a civil war, and now, had single-handedly rendered the most terrifying weapon in the world government's arsenal utterly useless against him. "By all the seas," Onagumo whispered. "What in the name of the gods have we found?" Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. A dead of rain, a whisper of dawn. The rain was a whisper. A blessing, a promise kept. It fell on the silent battlefield of Alubarna, washing the blood from the cobblestones and the hatred from the air. In the Grand Plaza, soldiers from both sides, men who had been trying to kill each other moments before, now stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned to the sky, their weapons forgotten. They were no longer rebels or royals. They were just Alabastans, united in the awe of a miracle. High in the shattered clock tower, the world was quiet. Robin knelt beside Naruto's unconscious form, the gentle patter of the rain the only sound. His body, which had blazed with the light of a star, now seemed terribly fragile. The golden, sun-flare patterns on his skin were slowly fading, receding like an impossible tide, leaving pale, new skin behind. She reached out, her fingers hesitating before gently brushing a lock of blonde hair from his forehead. He was warm, a steady, deep heat that felt like the heart of summer. A clatter of armored footsteps on the stairs broke the spell. Robin was on her feet in an instant, her body a coiled spring of defensive tension, her arms crossed. The Royal Guard, led by the F.A. Elkin-headed Pell and the Jackal-headed Chaka, the 2 strongest fighters in the kingdom, burst onto the balcony. Their swords were drawn, their faces grim, but they stopped dead at the scene before them. They saw the cratered stone, the woman of legendary beauty standing guard, and the young man at her feet, the man who had ascended to the heavens and saved them all. Pell's sharp eyes took in the scene, and he slowly, deliberately sheathed his sword. "The fighting has stopped," he said, his voice filled with a reverence that was usually reserved for the gods. "The rain has returned. Was this your doing?" Robin's gaze didn't waver. He kept a promise. Chaka stepped forward, his eyes on Naruto. He must be taken to the palace. Our best doctors will see to him. It was not a command, but a plea. A recognition of a debt so immense it could never be repaid. Robin studied their faces, saw no deception, only a profound, weary gratitude. She gave a single, sharp nod. Naruto awoke to the scent of lotus blossoms and the feel of cool, silken sheets against his skin. He was in a vast, sun-drenched room, its alabaster walls carved with intricate murals of the kingdom's history. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains of a grand balcony that overlooked a peaceful, verdant courtyard. He tried to sit up, and a wave of exhaustion so profound it felt like a physical weight washed over him, forcing him back down. "Don't," a calm voice said. Robin was sitting in a chair by his bedside, a thick, leather-bound book open in her lap. She looked different. The guarded tension she always carried was gone, replaced by a quiet serenity. The desert dust was gone, her dark hair was clean and shining, and she wore a simple, elegant blue dress provided by the palace. "Where are we?" he rasped, his throat dry. "The royal palace of Alubarna," she replied, closing her book. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. He looked at his hands. They felt like his own again, the phantom sensation of being unmade into pure energy slowly receding. He tried to feel for the star in his chest. It was there, but it was a faint, flickering ember, a pilot light struggling in a deep well of emptiness. "I feel drained," he said. "You flew into space and swallowed an explosion," she said, a hint of dry amusement in her voice, but her eyes were deadly serious. "I think drained is an understatement." She poured a glass of water from a pitcher on the nightstand and helped him drink. The cool liquid was a balm to his throat, but it didn't replenish him. He needed something else. "The sun," he murmured, his eyes drifting to the balcony. Understanding dawned on her face. She helped him stand, his legs unsteady, and supported him as they walked out into the warm, afternoon light. The moment the sun's rays touched his skin, Naruto let out a soft sigh of relief. It felt like coming home. He could feel the faint ember within him stir, a trickle of warmth and energy seeping into his depleted core. It wasn't a quick fix, it was a slow, deep-seated healing, like a parched plant finally being watered. He stood there for a long time, leaning on her, simply absorbing the light. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken truths of the clock tower. "I thought you were dead," she said softly, her voice so low it was almost carried away by the breeze. "Me too," he admitted. For a second there, it was loud, and then very, very quiet. He looked at her, his blue eyes clear and direct. "I heard you." She looked away, a faint blush on her cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Up there," he said, gesturing vaguely at the sky. "In the quiet, I heard you. You were the only thing I could hear." Before she could respond, footsteps approached. A man with long, dark hair and the weary, kind eyes of a king. Accompanied by a younger woman with striking blue hair and a bearing of quiet strength, entered the room. King Nefertari Cobra and his daughter, Princess Vivi. "You are awake," Cobra said, his voice filled with a deep, palpable relief. He bowed, a gesture of profound respect from a monarch to a stranger. "On behalf of the people of Alabasta, words are insufficient. You have saved us all. Anything you desire, anything our kingdom can offer, it is yours." Vivi stepped forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We owe you our lives. Our future." Naruto, still leaning on Robin, just smiled. "No one owes anyone anything. Just try not to get into any more civil wars, okay? It's a real mess to clean up." His simple, unassuming nature seemed to stun them more than his display of power. Cobra's expression turned grim. "I am afraid your troubles, and ours, may have only just begun." He held out a piece of paper, a communiqué delivered by a government bird. "This arrived this morning. From the world government. They know you are here. They refer to you as the heretic, Icarus. They have formally demanded your surrender, accusing you of destabilizing a sovereign nation and assassinating the warlord Crocodile." The lie was so audacious, so complete in its inversion of the truth, that Naruto could only laugh, a weak, hoarse sound. "Assassinating Crocodile. I turned him into a lawn ornament. He's probably still in his basement. They don't care about the truth. Robin said, her voice turning cold and hard. The survivor was back, her eyes sharp with calculation. This is Samael's move. He couldn't destroy you with force, so now he will poison the world against you with lies. He's putting you in a cage of politics. The dilemma was crushing. If Cobra refused to hand Naruto over, the world government would have a pretext to invade, to finish what the Buster Call had started under the guise of restoring order. If he complied, he would be betraying the savior of his nation to a fate worse than death. We will not hand you over, Vivi said, her voice ringing with a conviction that defied her youth. We will tell the world the truth. And who will they believe? Robin countered gently. A small, isolated kingdom in the Grand Line, or the monolithic authority of the world government. Samael is not a fool. He is already spinning the narrative. They were trapped. Naruto's presence, which had been Alabasta's salvation, was now its greatest liability. Far out at sea, the black sails of the Veritas were a blot against the clear sky. In his sterile, quiet observation room, Inquisitor Samael dictated his official report to a transponder snail, his voice a calm, melodic purr of absolute malice. The warlord's activities, while regrettable, were a direct result of the destabilizing influence of the Icarus subject. Evidence suggests the heretic's uncontrolled energy emissions were responsible for the prolonged drought, which he then exploited to incite the rebellion. The so-called bomb was, in all likelihood, a construct of his own power, an elaborate false flag designed to paint himself as a savior. His ultimate goal is to position himself as a new god king, a false deity for a desperate populace to worship. He paused, letting the monstrous lies settle. He is not merely a devil fruit user. He is a walking, sentient ancient weapon, a threat to the very balance of the world. The Godslayer protocol is no longer a matter of simple elimination. It must be a campaign of systematic containment and ideological purification. We must isolate him, dismantle his reputation, and ensure that no nation will ever grant him sanctuary. He must be made to stand alone against the world. He finished the transmission and looked at the map, at the small, peaceful island of Alabasta. He tapped his finger on it. Your move, little king, he whispered to the empty room. Show me if your gratitude outweighs your fear. 2 days later, Naruto was almost fully recovered. He spent his days in the sun, the ember in his chest growing back into a steady, confident flame. The more time he spent with Robin, the more the space between them shrank. They talked for hours, not about battles or plans, but about life. He told her of his dream to become Hokage, of the loneliness of his childhood. She, in turn, spoke of the scholars of Ohara, of her endless search for the truth, of the crushing weight of being the world's last survivor. They were two solitudes, finding a home in each other. On the third day, King Cobra granted Robin's deepest wish. He led her and Naruto deep into the crypts beneath the palace, to a hidden chamber that had been sealed for centuries. The air was still and thick with the dust of ages. And in the center of the room, lit by Naruto's soft, golden glow, was the poneglyph. It was a massive cube of indestructible, dark blue stone, covered in the angular, geometric script of a forgotten language. Robin approached it with the reverence of a pilgrim reaching a holy shrine. Her fingers traced the ancient characters, her lips moving silently as she read the words of the dead. Naruto stood back, giving her space. He couldn't read the script, but he could feel it. The stone emanated a profound, ancient sadness, the echo of a lost world, a silenced history. Robin spent an hour in silent communion with the stone. When she finally turned, her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of triumph and confusion. It's here, she whispered. The location of the ancient weapon, Pluton. It's hidden somewhere in this very country. She had found it. The goal that had driven her for 20 years, that had led her to ally herself with monsters. But there's something else, she said, her brow furrowed. It's not part of the main text. It's like an addendum, a prophecy. It speaks of the ancient enemies of the gods. And it says, when the world is draped in darkness, the dawn will be brought not by the sun, but by the one who is the sun itself. Her eyes locked on Naruto's. He, who had eaten the sun god fruit. He, who had brought the rain, the dawn, after Alabasta's long night. The poneglyph wasn't just a history book. It was a prophecy, and he was walking, breathing, living in the middle of it. That evening, They stood on the balcony of his room, watching the stars emerge over the now healing land. The weight of the poneglyph's words and the world government's ultimatum hung between them. "We have to leave," Naruto said, breaking the silence. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. Cobra is a good man. Vivi too. I'm not going to let them put their kingdom on the line for me. Samael wants to isolate me. Fine. Let's not give him an entire country to hold hostage. Robin looked at him, her heart aching with a feeling she couldn't quite name. He was choosing exile to protect people he barely knew. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Everywhere," he said, a familiar, irrepressible grin returning to his face. He looked out at the vast, starry sky, at the endless ocean that lay beyond the horizon. The world was hunting them. A man who called himself an inquisitor was painting him as a demon. The most powerful organization on the planet wanted him in chains. He should have been afraid. He felt more free than he ever had in his life. "The government thinks they can put me in a cage of lies," he said, his voice ringing with a defiant joy. "Let them try. We'll just have to be too fast to catch, and too bright for their shadows to touch." He turned to her, his blue eyes shining with the light of 1,000 suns. "I'm still looking for my place in this world, Robin. And you're still looking for your history. I'm thinking maybe they're on the same map." She didn't answer with words. She simply stepped closer, and for the first time, she smiled a true, unguarded smile, a smile that reached her eyes and lit them from within. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The next morning, at a small, hidden port on the southern coast, a new ship waited for them. It was a sleek, sturdy caravel, a gift from the royal family, its sails a deep, royal blue. It was stocked with enough supplies for a year, and the finest maps in the kingdom. Princess Vivi was there to see them off. She handed Robin an eternal pose, its needle pointing toward the next island on their log pose route. Then she turned to Naruto and bowed deeply. "Thank you is not enough," she said. "But it's all I have. Good luck, Naruto. May the sun always shine on your path. Don't worry about us, Vivi," he said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You just take care of this country. If you ever need help, just yell really loud. I'll probably hear you." He and Robin boarded the ship. As he unfurled the sails, they caught the morning wind, and the caravel, which they had christened the Dawn Flower, pulled away from the shore. Alabasta, a kingdom reborn under a cleansing rain, shrank behind them. Ahead, the Grand Line waited, a world of endless adventure and unimaginable danger. Naruto stood at the helm, his hand on the wheel, the sun on his face. Robin stood beside him, her eyes on the horizon, a future she had never dared to imagine unfolding before her. They were fugitives. They were heretics. They were the world's most wanted. And they were finally, completely, free. Chapter 8 End.